Hi, I'm Dylan Byers.
And I'm Hadas Gold.
And this is On Media.
So Dylan, you wrote a piece this week about how the media reaction to Ted Cruz's faux filibuster was quite a bit different from what the reaction after Wendy Davis had her filibuster in Texas. Have you been getting a little bit of backlash from that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of backlash, especially from the left. Basically, the idea here is that comparing what Wendy Davis did in Texas for 11 hours and what Ted Cruz did in Washington for 21 hours is like comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
What he did was not a filibuster. Technically, he couldn't actually stop anything. Once you get down into the intricacies of what's going on, the explanation for the difference in coverage is not just due to some sort of bias. I still do think, though, that when you just look at kind of 30,000 feet, what you're talking about is two political animals trying to make a statement through a demonstration of physical will. And in one case, one was lifted to this kind of hero status, Wendy Davis, and in the other case with Ted Cruz was kind of openly mocked by the media on Twitter, in the coverage, things like that. And I do wonder if Wendy Davis had been in Ted Cruz's shoes, not tennis shoes, his shoes.
He was wearing tennis shoes, though.
Was he wearing tennis shoes?
He was not wearing his cowboy boots.
Amazing.
I am not in my argument boots.
That I think the coverage might have been a little different.
So speaking of Ted Cruz and all the opposition to Obamacare, there's been a lot of talk recently about how the right-wing media, people like Rush Limbaugh, still have a huge effect on politics and on Republicans and their willingness to potentially deviate from the super right-wing side of the party.
Right, and this is something we see more and more, basically the argument that you've got all of these Republican congressmen who don't want to face a primary contest from somebody on the far right. The criticism this time is very much coming on both sides of the aisle, very much the way that the criticism of Cruz is coming from both sides of the aisle. On the left, you have Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times basically saying that the right-wing media echo chamber is destroying the Republican Party because of this pressure. At the same time, you've got a very conservative pundit like Fox News analyst Brit Hume, very much saying the same thing, not quite so dramatically, but very much making the same argument. And the response from folks like Rush Limbaugh is like, hey, wait a second, we're not pressuring these guys to do anything. You guys don't understand what the American people actually want. It's you guys who are afraid of us. It's not guys like Senator Ted Cruz or anything like that.
So Dylan, although the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani did not meet with President Obama this week, he did meet with the who's who of the media world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You kind of wonder who are the most influential people in media. I would say that group. I mean, you've got like the executives from the big networks. You've got the publisher, the editor, and one of the lead columnists from the New York Times. You've got Politico's own Susan Glazer's there. And what's really interesting, too, is that when he meets with the media, the kind of diplomatic concerns of world leaders are off the table. So you can get a guy like David Remnick, editor of The New Yorker, who really presses Rouhani on his stance on the Holocaust and on his predecessor's denial of the Holocaust, and can say things like, do you unequivocally renounce your predecessor's denialism, that sort of thing. And the answers there are... how you interpret the answers he gives are somewhat murky, but it's just kind of this amazing historical moment. On the second floor of this hotel, 1 block away from the UN, the like chieftains of the media are meeting with the Iranian president. Speaking of Rouhani's remarks, especially about the Holocaust, this is something that has generated a lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement, specifically now between CNN and the Wall Street Journal. Tell us about that.
So Christiane Amanpour interviewed President Rouhani, and they aired the interview. And shortly after, the Iranian state news agency came forth and said CNN's translation was incorrect, and they claimed that CNN had added comments of Rouhani's that weren't actually there. The Wall Street Journal then came out and wrote an editorial saying that they were siding with the Iranian state news agency, saying that the CNN translation was wrong and that it seems as though CNN had added some information. But we spoke to a journalist at Al Monitor who speaks Farsi, and he said after viewing the raw footage that CNN provided and also viewing the interview that actually CNN's translation is pretty close, save for one exception, which is the use of the word Holocaust.
Which is a big word.
It is a big word. There have been some people say that he technically said historical occurrence. Some people said he said genocide. Either way, though, it seems as though that the problem may have been that CNN did not air the entire interview and that the raw footage shows the extra comments. And the Iranian state news agency did come back and say this may explain why we thought that they had added extra, but it doesn't explain the inaccuracies, as they said, in the translations. And we haven't heard yet from the Wall Street Journal what they say. So Dylan, what happens when Grover Norquist, journalists, and a comedian go to an improv show?
This is a great setup.
Josh Rogan gets punched in the face.
How did I not know the answer to that one? So this is true. Josh Rogan, who is a correspondent at the Daily Beast, covers national security, foreign policy, this sort of thing, went to a improv club here in DC, started tweeting about just how bad the comedian, a professional comedian who's performed for Obama, just like how bad his routine was and how lame it was. End of the show, the comedian comes over, he says, "Are you Josh Rogan?" Josh Rogan says, "Yes." He promptly punches him in the face. Comedian walks away, comes back 10 seconds later, punches him in the face again, subsequently gets arrested. His first impulse was to tweet, right? And so he tweets like, you know, said comedian just punched me in the face, which is like, to me, is like a very kind of like Washington journalist thing to do. I mean, I think there are a lot of parts of the country where if you got punched in the face, you would like punch the guy back, or you wouldn't admit that you just got clocked in the face by a comedian. But you know, like it's like, I think in Rogan's mind, he's like, oh, I've got breaking news.
Happy Friday, I'm Hadas Gold.
I'm Dylan Byers, and this was On Media. For these and more stories, you can check out our blog at politico.com.